What if wisdom isn't just a trait we develop, but a living divine presence that actively moves through the universe? In the Wisdom of Solomon, wisdom is described not simply as good judgment or intelligence, but as something much deeper and far more powerful, a holy force, alive and dynamic. This ancient text portrays wisdom as a reflection of eternal light, a spotless mirror of the working of God, a phrase that goes beyond metaphor. It suggests that wisdom is a direct expression of God's own nature, not a tool we use, but a being we encounter. According to Solomon, wisdom was present at the beginning of creation, working alongside God to shape the cosmos. It's portrayed almost like a co-creator, not separate from God, but flowing from Him, woven into the very fabric of existence. That's a radical idea. We often think of wisdom as abstract, something you gain over time through experience or study. But here, it's a spiritual entity with its own will, its own movement, and its own purpose. Solomon says this wisdom doesn't just dwell in heaven. It reaches down to humanity. It seeks us out. It invites us into something higher. Alignment with God's eternal order. This idea completely shifts how we think about spiritual insight. Wisdom isn't passive. It's not neutral. It's active, calling, guiding, convicting, even protecting those who seek truth. It's a bridge between heaven and earth. The book even goes so far as to say that wisdom enters into the souls of the righteous and makes them friends of God. That's deeply personal and deeply relational. It means wisdom isn't just about what you know. It's about who you're walking with. This vision of wisdom feels surprisingly relevant today. In a world overloaded with information, Solomon's message cuts through the noise. Real wisdom isn't found in data or clever arguments. It's found in surrendering to a divine presence that shapes everything. It's found in listening, in humility, in tuning your heart to God's voice. According to Solomon, this wisdom is available, but it doesn't force itself. It's gentle. It waits for a heart that's open. And when it finds that heart, it becomes a force of clarity, strength, and peace. That's not just ancient poetry. That's a promise. And maybe it's exactly what we need. Unlike the more reflective tone of Proverbs or Ecclesiastes, the wisdom of Solomon doesn't hold back. It confronts injustice head-on. Solomon doesn't merely offer poetic reflections about life or musings on the human condition. He draws a bold line in the sand, declaring that true wisdom will always challenge corruption, hypocrisy, and oppressive power. This is part of what makes the book so controversial, and, for some, so dangerous. In a time when ruling elites held tight control over religious texts and spiritual authority, Solomon's voice rings out with a message that's radically countercultural. If rulers ignore wisdom, they will face divine retribution. That's not subtle. It's not comfortable. But it is powerful. Wisdom here isn't just advice for personal living. It's a divine force that calls the world into account. Solomon paints wisdom as a defender of the oppressed, not just a comfort to the hurting, but a spiritual weapon that stands against evil. It rebukes injustice. It exposes lies. It calls out those in power who build kingdoms on greed, pride, and exploitation. For Solomon, wisdom is not neutral. It takes sides, and it sides with righteousness. This force doesn't whisper from the sidelines. It speaks boldly in the face of tyranny. It sees through empty rituals and fake piety, cutting straight to the heart. That's why it unsettled early leaders. This wasn't the kind of message that propped up the status quo. It was the kind that could flip everything upside down. What's striking is how Solomon links wisdom to divine justice in real time. This isn't just about judgment at the end of the world. It's about how God's justice is already moving through the present, operating invisibly but powerfully. Solomon describes wisdom as an active presence that rewards the righteous and confronts the wicked. This isn't wishful thinking, it's a deeply spiritual truth. According to Solomon, every unjust act, every lie, every abuse of power leaves a mark, and wisdom records it all. Even when the world praises the wicked, wisdom sees them for what they are and brings consequences that can't be avoided. That's a hard message, but it's also hopeful, because it means justice matters. It means righteousness matters. And it reminds us that when we align ourselves with divine wisdom, we don't stand alone. We stand with something eternal, something strong enough to break chains, reveal truth, and call the world to something better. One of the most profound claims in the wisdom of Solomon is that true wisdom leads to immortality, not just symbolic remembrance or a legacy that lives on, but actual eternal life. That might sound like a stretch at first. After all, we're used to thinking of wisdom as practical insight, something that helps us live better or make good decisions. But Solomon pushes the idea much further. He presents wisdom as more than moral guidance. It's a divine pathway that reconnects humanity to God's original design, life without end. According to the text, God created man for incorruption and made him in the image of his own eternity. In other words, we were made to live forever, not only biologically, but spiritually, in perfect relationship with God. But through sin, that connection was broken. Wisdom, then, becomes the bridge that helps us return. This isn't just philosophical, it's deeply personal. Solomon writes that those who love and obey wisdom are assured of immortality, not because they've earned it through effort, but because they've aligned their lives with the eternal will of God. It's not about mastering information. It's about walking in harmony with divine truth. And when you live that way, when your soul is open, your heart is pure, and your life is shaped by humility, justice, and love, you're already participating in something eternal. You're not just waiting for eternal life after death. You're beginning to live it now. This view isn't isolated. It echoes what Jesus later says in the New Testament. Whoever believes in me will live, even though they die. John 11:25. Solomon's words seem to lay the foundation for that very promise. He sees wisdom not as a side benefit to faith, but as the very heart of it, a sacred connection to God that transforms how we live and what we live for. And more than that, it transforms who we're becoming. Wisdom shapes the soul. It purifies it. It protects it. And ultimately, it prepares it for eternal life. That's why this message was so bold, and maybe even threatening, to early religious leaders. It bypassed rigid systems and spoke directly to the soul. It said, if you seek wisdom with all your heart, you'll find God, and in finding Him, you'll find life that never ends. That's not just ancient theology. That's a promise still alive for anyone willing to seek truth beyond the surface and walk the path of wisdom today. The wisdom of Solomon makes a haunting claim. When people reject divine wisdom, the damage doesn't wait until some final judgment. It begins now, deep within. According to Solomon, wickedness isn't just morally wrong, it's spiritually corrosive. Every time someone chooses selfishness over truth, or pride over humility, they aren't just breaking a rule, they're breaking something inside themselves. The text describes this inner decay in vivid, almost poetic terms. The wicked are tormented by their own conscience. They may look like they're thriving on the outside, powerful, wealthy, influential, but on the inside, they're hollowed out. There's no peace, no rest. Just a quiet, persistent unrest that eats away at their soul. Solomon writes, they reasoned unsoundly. Let us enjoy the good things while we can. exposing a mindset that chases pleasure and ignores eternity. It's a worldview based on instant gratification, and it comes at a high price, because when we live only for ourselves, we lose touch with something deeper. We lose the ability to hear the quiet voice of truth. We lose our sensitivity to what really matters, and over time, that inner stillness, the part of us meant to connect with God, becomes numb. That's not just a consequence, it's a tragedy. What's even more sobering is Solomon's claim that this decay isn't caused by external punishment, it's self-inflicted. Wickedness, in his view, is like a poison that a person drinks, thinking it will satisfy, but instead, it destroys them from within. This spiritual rot starts small, a lie here, a compromise there, but eventually it manifests as anxiety, fear, and emptiness that no success or pleasure can fix. The wicked aren't just facing future judgment, they're already living in a form of it. And here's where Solomon's words echo the teachings of Jesus. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Matthew 16:26. The connection is striking. Both warn that a life disconnected from divine truth leads to internal collapse. It's not about punishment from an angry God. It's about the natural result of turning away from the source of life. But there's hope, too. Solomon's message isn't just a warning. It's an invitation. Wisdom still calls out, offering healing, restoration, and peace for anyone willing to return. Because no matter how far someone has wandered, the moment they turn toward wisdom, the process of renewal begins. And with it, the soul starts to come alive again. One of the most powerful themes in the wisdom of Solomon is the idea that wisdom doesn't just enlighten, it protects. It's not some passive virtue you carry in your back pocket. It's an active force, like a shield that guards the soul. Solomon paints a vivid picture of wisdom as a defender, not only helping the righteous make good choices, but literally rescuing them from danger, from deception, and even from destruction. He tells stories of wisdom intervening in critical moments, guiding the faithful through trials and standing with them when everything else seems to fall apart. This isn't a poetic idea. It's deeply spiritual and incredibly personal. It means that when you walk in wisdom, you're not walking alone. The book describes wisdom as a kindly spirit that enters into the soul of the righteous and makes them friends of God. That kind of closeness means wisdom isn't just advice, it's relationship. It's the quiet presence that warns you before you step into a trap, that strengthens you when you're tempted, and that speaks truth when the world is full of lies. Solomon's view of wisdom goes far beyond intellectual brilliance. It's moral clarity, spiritual discernment, and divine companionship all rolled into one. And this is where things get really encouraging. Because in a world full of spiritual confusion, temptation, and pressure, the righteous are not defenseless. Solomon shows us that wisdom gives us more than insight. It gives us strength. It empowers us to stand firm, to resist compromise, to walk with integrity even when we're surrounded by corruption. It helps us know when to speak up and when to stay silent, when to move forward and when to wait. Wisdom becomes like an internal compass, always pointing us back to God's path, even when the road is hard. The Bible echoes this truth in other places too. Proverbs says, "He is a shield to those whose walk is blameless," Proverbs 2:7. And in Wisdom of Solomon, that idea takes on even more depth. Wisdom not only shields, it rescues. It rescues, it renews. And for the righteous, for those who seek to live in alignment with God, that means we don't face the darkness alone. We're held, we're guided, we're guarded by something far greater than ourselves. That's not just a beautiful thought. It's a spiritual reality, one that invites us to seek wisdom not just for answers, but for protection, and to trust that when we do, God's presence walks with us every step of the way. In the wisdom of Solomon, one truth stands out with striking clarity. Wisdom and righteousness are inseparable. You can't truly have one without the other. Solomon makes it clear that real wisdom isn't just about thinking deeply or making smart decisions. It's about living rightly. Wisdom, in its purest form, produces a life of integrity, humility, and compassion. It's not just what you know, it's how you live. According to Solomon, those who walk in wisdom naturally walk in justice. They care for others. They honor truth. They reflect God's character in the way they treat people, in the decisions they make, and in the things they value. This connection between wisdom and righteousness isn't just a theme, it's a warning. Solomon paints a sobering picture of what happens when people reject wisdom. Without it, he says, we become morally blind. We start chasing temporary pleasures, justifying selfishness, and losing sight of eternal truth. Short and sorrowful is our life, the unrighteous say, convinced that nothing matters beyond the here and now. That mindset, Solomon warns, leads to a life marked by injustice, envy, pride, and ultimately, spiritual ruin. It's not that they don't know better. It's that they've chosen to live without wisdom, and when that happens, righteousness fades. But for those who seek wisdom with sincerity, something beautiful happens. Their lives begin to mirror the justice and goodness of God. Solomon describes wisdom as a kindly spirit that shapes our character and moves us toward moral clarity. It's not about perfection, it's about direction. Those who walk with wisdom are on a path that leads toward peace, fairness, and truth. This same theme echoes in the New Testament, where James writes, "The wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits." James 3:17. In both texts, wisdom isn't cold or detached, it's relational, active, and deeply good. Solomon's message is both practical and prophetic. If we want to live in harmony with God's will, we need more than clever thinking. We need hearts shaped by wisdom. Because true wisdom transforms us. It humbles us. It makes us slow to speak, quick to listen, and eager to do what's right. And in a world that often rewards pride and power, Solomon's vision is a reminder that the truly wise are those who live justly, not because it's easy, but because it's right. One of the most daring ideas in the wisdom of Solomon is that divine wisdom doesn't just comfort the righteous, it confronts the powerful. It has a way of exposing what's hidden, cutting through appearances, and revealing the truth behind the masks people wear. According to Solomon, wisdom is intolerable to the wicked precisely because it shines a light they can't stand. It exposes hypocrisy, calls out injustice, and refuses to be silenced. The wicked, he writes, say of the righteous, "Let us lie in wait for him, because he is inconvenient to us and opposes our actions." That statement could have been said of the prophets, or even of Jesus. Wisdom isn't just inconvenient, it's threatening. It disturbs the false peace of those who thrive on control, pride, and deception. And that's exactly why this book was seen as dangerous. It doesn't just comfort the oppressed, it challenges the oppressors. Solomon's view of wisdom isn't quiet or tame. It's bold. It has a voice. It speaks up when something is wrong. It calls those in power to account, not with violence, but with truth, and that's often more terrifying to the corrupt than anything else. Just like Jesus stood toe-to-toe with the Pharisees and exposed their empty religion, wisdom in this text stands against rulers and systems built on injustice. It doesn't care about titles or appearances. It sees straight to the heart. This theme echoes deeply through the New Testament. Jesus was crucified not because he lacked wisdom, but because his wisdom revealed the rottenness underneath the religious system of his day. He was inconvenient, just like Solomon describes the righteous. Wisdom exposes what the world tries to hide: pride, greed, and hypocrisy, and that exposure always invites resistance. That's why those who walk in wisdom must also walk with courage, because they will face pushback. Solomon seems to be preparing us for that. If you follow wisdom, expect opposition, but don't fear it. The beauty of Solomon's insight is that even though wisdom provokes resistance, it also promises God's protection. The souls of the righteous are in the hand of God, he writes, and no torment will ever touch them. That's the anchor. No matter how fiercely the world pushes back, wisdom stands with those who love the truth. And in the end, truth will outlast every lie, every injustice, and every crumbling throne built on deceit. It's not hard to see why the wisdom of Solomon was excluded from many versions of the Bible. This book doesn't just offer inspiration. It challenges the very foundation of worldly power and shallow religion. It presents a picture of wisdom that is bold, divine, uncontainable, a force that speaks truth to power, exposes corruption, comforts the righteous, and warns the wicked. This wisdom doesn't fit neatly into man-made systems. It doesn't flatter kings or stroke the egos of religious elites. Instead, it invites ordinary people into a relationship with the eternal, a connection so transformative it can't be controlled, bought, or institutionalized. That alone made it threatening. Early church leaders may have found this book too dangerous, not because it lacked truth, but because it carried too much of it, the kind of truth that rattles the comfortable and awakens the sleeping. The wisdom of Solomon dares to say that immortality begins with a life aligned to God's order, that wisdom itself is a pathway into eternity. It teaches that rejecting wisdom leads to inner ruin, and that divine justice is already at work, not just in some distant future, but now. These teachings don't leave much room for passive faith. They demand transformation. They demand courage. And that brings us to today. We may not live under the rule of ancient empires or religious councils deciding which books to keep, but the tension between truth and comfort is still alive. In a world driven by image, distraction, and shallow thinking, the kind of wisdom Solomon describes still feels radical. It calls us to deeper honesty, deeper humility, and a deeper walk with God, one that isn't always easy, but is always worth it. Early church leaders may have found this book too dangerous, not because it lacked truth, but because it carried too much of it, the kind of truth that rattles the comfortable and awakens the sleeping. The wisdom of Solomon dares to say that immortality begins with a life aligned to God's order, that wisdom itself is a pathway into eternity. It teaches that rejecting wisdom leads to inner ruin, and that divine justice is already at work, not just in some distant future, but now. These teachings don't leave much room for passive faith. They demand transformation. They demand courage. And that brings us to today. We may not live under the rule of ancient empires or religious councils deciding which books to keep, but the tension between truth and comfort is still alive. In a world driven by image, distraction, and shallow thinking, the kind of wisdom Solomon describes still feels radical. It calls us to deeper honesty, deeper humility, and a deeper walk with. Think about someone who walks away from a lucrative career because they realize it's costing them their soul, or someone who refuses to stay silent when injustice is happening at work or in their community. That's the spirit of Solomon's wisdom in action. It's not just about knowing the right thing, it's about doing it, even when it costs something. So maybe the real question is this: what would happen if we actually lived the kind of wisdom Solomon describes? Not just admired it from a distance, but embraced it. Let it guide us, challenge us, protect us, and reshape us. The wisdom of Solomon may have been rejected by some, but its message still speaks. A timeless call to rise above comfort and follow the path that leads to life, justice, and the heart of God Himself.